Zenia. I'm from Digital Hub Denmark, and we are a marketing consortia. And shortly, I will have Barbara, our impact investor, with me on stage. So bear with me for the next 5 minutes before we go to the actual main session, which is with Barbara. Barbara is looking for widespread impact. And at Digital Hub Denmark, we can only agree. We want to see initiatives that goes beyond just yet another event, just yet another networking, just yet another cluster who's gathering up tons of public money, but what does actually come out of it? So the way that we work, we focus very much upon what value can we provide to the single startup for all of these public money and all of these initiatives. We do so in 4 areas because, like you guys, we also have KPIs, and we are also being measured upon what do we need to reach. So we need to attract international investors. We need to attract international tech talent, which is just as important. Funding is, of course, essential, but it's just not enough. Because if you can't hire the right people to actually make the work happen, it doesn't matter. And then, of course, last but not least, customers. And in our world, customers is in the form of a delegation, as we newly established this visitor and delegation center, where we are showcasing the digital Danish startups, your technologies, and then before COVID at least, we actually received 800 business delegations a year. And hopefully after COVID, those 800 business delegations, we're going to sit and we're going to evaluate what is your objective, who's actually coming to the country, and is there a startup or a company in Denmark where this is a potential customer, and then we will do the matchmaking. If there is no potential, we will not call you up. Most likely we will take that maybe Chinese delegation, and then we will forward them to someone else so that we don't waste anyone's time. We need to ensure that it creates value on both sides of the table. And then, like anyone else in these days, we also have a green focus across the different industries. Actually, ideally, if we could, in the next 5 to 10 years, create a framework where one of you guys would be the next green unicorn, then we are truly a success. Normally, I would skip through actually who are we and what is it that we do slides, because the interesting part is how can you use us. But I just started on May 3rd, and I'm sitting with our investments. And for the past 10 years, I've been connecting investors and startups in the Nordics. And everyone that I talk to in the current ecosystem actually don't know what is it that Digital Hub Denmark does and how can you guys use us. So I'll just add a couple of words of how you as a startup or how you as an investor can actually use us. So these are our owners, and that gives us an advantage. And that is also why we're really excited about being here with Sustainery at the Green Gold Investment Summit. I'm hoping to talk to all of you and collect your inputs and ideas for initiatives that we could do in the future when it comes to talent or when it comes to capital. Both on a political level, but also on a very down-to-earth level. Either you as a startup or an organization who has an idea on how can we help more startups. And the reason that I'm showing these guys is that we have 3 ministries owning us, and then also 3 private players, which means we actually have the power and background to effectuate on a political level. And we also have the ear of some of the politicians in another level, in which is I have not been part of organizations like this before. So anyone is interested in also on the policy recommendations, now is your chance. Okay. I feel, especially at this crowd, that I'm actually repeating the obvious, but just for the sake of the structure of the presentations, some of the key challenges, not only Denmark, but on a global level that we challenge, is of course the high CO2 emissions, pollution, waste, and the loss of biodiversity. I can tell you that me personally, when I first realized how bad it is, I think it was a few years back, with the UN Assembly, and they presented this calculation for the CO2 emissions, saying we, on a global level, as a world, no matter where in the world you're living, we have 580 tons of CO2 emissions left. And then that's it. Then there is no more world. It will break. I was like, okay. So I'm new. A few years back into this green world, I was like, what does that actually mean? And then someone was so kind to do the calculation and saying, okay, Denmark obviously has our own share of these CO2 emissions who are still left. And if you translate that into time, it means that we have in Denmark between 10 and 12 years to radically reduce our CO2 emissions. Otherwise, there will be no planet. There will be no Denmark. And Human just before mentioned that there's plenty of initiatives out there, both on an international and local level, both on a public and private level. But I guess maybe you will agree with me that the attention towards this area has never been greater than now. But it is also a little bit late, right? We're very much behind here. So let's focus upon what can we do. And in the beautiful green report, which disappeared, which is the purpose. Perfect, thank you. It's circulating amongst the audience. That was the purpose. We've realized a couple of drivers. So of course, on a societal level, we have the sense of emergency. We also have economic incentives coming in public fund schemes, subsidies to certain areas. We are looking for talent. This is my favorite, where we're saying, okay, we know that 10 years, 20 years back, IT became default and no longer was an industry in its own. It is a part of every single industry. It works across sectors. And green is basically the new IT when it comes to this principle. Green, hopefully, will start to move across every single sector so that everyone, also existing companies and existing organizations, will start to implement the green, just like you guys who've decided to start out as a green startup. Then, of course, we have the new generation, and I'm sad to say, I did a talk last week, and someone said, and Zenia has been doing this for 10 years. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so old that I've been doing something for 10 years. So I guess I'm no longer the new and upcoming generation. But the new and upcoming generation, if you look at all the trends, focus very much upon this. And we also had a talent agenda. And they actually truly care. Because I've been working with hundreds of startups, and I've seen their struggles when it comes to hiring. And some of the questions they're asking is, what do you do for the climate? How are you on diversity? What is it that you're doing for your team and culture? So it is just something more than just not, oh my God, this is completely wrong. There is something more to it than this is just my next job. I want something more than salary. I want to be able to develop, and I want to be able to be part of a company who takes responsibility and who makes a difference. Cool. Okay. Can someone please tell me what time is it? Because like 10:25. 10:25. There you go. Okay. I will speed up my presentation. Key initiatives driving our business innovation. We have the cluster platforms, which are formally internet-connected networks. We have the business accelerators, who provide access to capital and mentoring and do an actual program for you as a startup. And then, of course, we have the public funding schemes, either as actual funds or as subsidies. All of these initiatives will only succeed if they decide to take the leap and to decide to take the position of setting the startups first. So you can't just do a program for the sake of the program. You need to understand every single startup that is part of your program or your funding scheme, and then create value to them. And then, leading over to Barbara, which is our main guest of today, impact investors. So more and more traditional investors are starting to transcend and saying, okay, we actually also believe that impact is the way forward, and that the companies that we're going to invest in needs to have a greater impact than just on the financial side. And lucky enough, we had Danske Bank doing a research on this matter. And part of what we've seen is that it is still, I asked Human a little bit earlier, do you generally believe that it's the responsibility of the public or of the private? And so far, it is still the private that's actually taking the grand leap. So I think we can only encourage the public to join us as private actors and actually do something about this. I'll skip all of my other points, and then I would like to see Barbara up here with me on stage.
Hi, Zenia.
Hi, welcome. So there is a thing. This is our main camera, and then we have a few over here. And actually, what we like is we'd like to stand next to the tables, because then otherwise we can't really connect and interact with our audience.
And I'm all connected to this, so I'll try to step out.
That's perfect. Barbara, can you start off by saying a bit about your background and who you are as an impact investor?
Yeah, so, and thank you for having me. So I have a bit of a different background than many other investors. So from a very early stage, when I was quite young, I took quite an interest in how you build an efficient society and even efficient democracy. So with 2 degrees in political science, I decided to join the Ministry of Finance, later the Prime Minister's office, and did tons of work on political reforms within energy, healthcare, even digital infrastructure. And then after a few years, I realized that this is super interesting. I had an amazing opportunity to have impact, but I wanted more action. So I wanted more sort of develop strategy, implement strategy, execute. And then you have to be careful for what you wish for, because then I looked around and I thought, the financial sector seems pretty interesting. Money flows as blood in the veins of society, so I also thought it was really important. I was offered a job in the core strategy function in a large Nordic bank. And then a few months later, I was there working on strategy, executing. Then came the financial crisis. And then after that, sort of 10, 12 years of, I have to say, interesting ride. Super interesting ride of basically transformation work. So firstly, driven by financial breakdown. So that was the first thing we experienced back in 2008. Lots of us have experienced it. I experienced it very firsthand.
Barbara used to work for Danske Bank, a Nets company, and implementing NemID, and was responsible for Dankort and clearing and so on. Just for background.
So if we should just flip through the kinds of disruption that was in the financial sector, or that we experienced in the financial sector, the first was driven by financial breakdown. The next one was the increase in the cost of capital. So basically, what we were serving capital, the cost increased dramatically during that time. Then we were disrupted by digital opportunities. Then by new business players, new technology players, and then finally, just as the icing on the cake, came sort of the regulatory transformation. You all have heard of GDPR, and that was also a major transformation. So I would say that was an all-in-one learning platform that I was super grateful to be part of. I was responsible for everything from sort of a large transformation end-to-end process to, as you mentioned, the national digital infrastructure products, Dankort in Denmark, BankAccept in Norway, BankID, NemID, and NemID in Denmark. So basically, the solutions that makes us some of the most efficient countries in the world. So what I came to appreciate during these years, I think, was really the impact that technology can have on a society. So I realized that there's a major strength, of course, in political visions and regulation, etc. But also I realized that I find the consumers and market players, everything from startups to big corporates, as being the biggest and most important political actors that we have at the moment. We all know the impact of Facebook and Twitter, how they've impacted negatively on the representative democracy. We also know how positively Ørsted has impacted our society with development of, as we say, the wind, the wind,
That's going to be the new thing
bicycles.
here on stage.
I think that's the movement of today. Yeah, so I joined it. I decided at that time that I wanted to, instead of representing the big corporates, I wanted to join building of smaller companies. This realization actually came a few years before the climate revolution that I will almost say is going on right now. But when looking into climate technology, I see many similarities, basically, to the disruption that has happened in the financial sector. We see disruption of technology, we see disruption of value chains, of business models, of regulation. So a lot of the things that I take from the financial sector, I think we can apply into this. So when I decided to jump out, when I thought I was old enough to jump out of corporate, I decided to stand on two legs. So one leg is I do board work with fintechs. So I'm on the board of a mobile-only insurance company, a European mobile payments platform, Hardcore Capital, Danish, gone European venture capital fund, and then I'm also an investor in a few super interesting startups. From Area 9, an adaptive learning platform, to Human Hotel, a home sharing platform, to Zenia, an automation platform for vertical farming. So, and lots more.
And lots more. Thank you. I know that we have a few Greentech startups amongst us, and some of those startups are also in fundraising mode. So if you would just add a bit about your typical ticket size, what's the size of investments that you do? I know that you prefer syndicates rather than investing alone.
Yeah. And so I would love to. I do ticket sizes up to 500,000 Danish in first rounds, and up to $1 million in follow-on. And then I take part of syndicates from 5 million to 40 million, so roundabout. And then everything is different from time to time, and then things develop. But that's sort of
Everything is because I remember some rounds that were a bit smaller. I think it was like 2 or 3 million. But have you moved past that? Are you only working with larger rounds, like 5+, or do you also do some of the small ones?
So it really depends on how you structure the financing. So I think we have some super good opportunities in Denmark with the whole matching. I think I have to say that I think Vækstfonden has executed super strongly with also in a very difficult situation during the pandemic. I've seen other countries, no need to mention, where it's like, oops, we ran out of money. It's like sort of couldn't you, or but in a political situation that was very uncertain, I think they've executed super good and fast.
Definitely. Okay, so maybe also some smaller rounds. One thing is, of course, to bring cash to the table. But like most early stage tech startups, you also want to have the right person working alongside you. Obviously, an investor can't do the work for you, but could you also share a little bit about how do you work with the portfolio companies that you are engaged in?
And it's of course super different. It's different upon who they are, what they need, and the situation that they're in. But I can talk you practically through how we work with Zenia.
Examples? We like specific examples.
Yeah. So Zenia was founded by a super cool team of engineers and business guys, Erkan, Servet, and Christopher.
Sounds like DTU.
Sounds like DTU, yeah. And what is one of the the cooler questions you can work with when you work in DTU or when you study in DTU? Their question was, how do you live on Mars? Not the question that I had in mind when I was studying political science, but that was a question, and that was a super strong question to work with because that eventually brought them into vertical farming. So these guys were one of the first to operate a vertical farm out of Denmark, and then when they were looking across globally. Vertical farming is a new sector, a new alternative way of farming, is that there's a few challenges that needs to be solved before this was super profitable and a good business case in the long run. when you look, at least myself, when I look at these really, really beautiful pictures of all this, like all the racks with the light and the greens, you think, okay, this is Mars, like this is fully automated, but really it's not yet on a global level. So these guys decided with their robotics and engineering background that they would focus fully on the automation side. Clip to where they are now, piloting an robotics automation platform, real life. So how are we working together? I guess
that was actually the question. Yes. How do you work with the startups?
Yeah, because I think there's probably 1,000 good and bad ways to work together. And I met this team last year. The first challenge they gave me was to help them put together a team of investors, and we put together a super strong team of leading robotics experts, farming experts, data experts, and we managed to close a round together with them. And then we looked at like what is the needs of how to work together, and we actually do like very regular interactions on a weekly basis where we touch upon everything from the product development, the customer dialogue, strategy, etc. Because then it's much easier when you're close enough to what's going on. Then it's also much easier for the founders to reach out and say, okay, we actually need to do a deep dive here, or we can say, oh, have you thought about this and that?
It was just because you said I can very practically walk you through, and then I thought you maybe would give us a very specific example. Can we still have a very specific example, like of one thing that you've done with Zenia?
Yeah. So going back to the financial sector, one of the greatest learnings was that being relevant to your clients, you need to work with your customer processes. And that's actually one of the things
that... This dawned upon the financial sector. Nice. Be relevant to your customers.
Yeah, and should I tell you how it dawned on the financial sector?
Well, maybe just the time. Like, do we have a year or...?
No, I think it came as a rough learning in the financial sector that you need to work with your processes. First, you did it from a clear cost perspective. We cannot just push products out to our clients. We need to know the processes that they are going that we're going through and the systems. Then came sort of the digital disruption, and then it's out, hey, we need to still be relevant to our clients, so we actually need to work with customer journeys. And then eventually we figured out that if you just design your customer journeys to the needs of your clients, then it will all be much cheaper. So that was sort of the full circle learning. And I think other sectors don't need to go through such a harsh learning circle. And this is also something that we worked with in Zenia, like how are you super relevant in a fully operating farm? You need to work with the end-to-end processes. So we worked very specifically with that.
Okay. So, end-to-end customer journeys, map them out, plan them, understand them from the very beginning to the very end.
Yeah,
yes.
and figure out where are you, and I think this is relevant for just as much for healthcare products. I was looking into wearables in the healthcare sector. If you don't understand where you're actually being relevant in the process, in the specific process where the nurse is doing this and that, then you're not relevant as a product. And I think this is one of the things that working with very technical products, you tend to sometimes become in love with your own product. And I love working with engineers. I've done that for in many different contexts. But this outside-in view, to be constantly having this outside-in view I think is super important.
So speaking of engineers discussing life on Mars, could we look for inspiration? Denmark as a country are very green. We want to be even more. Where should we look for inspiration?
Yeah, so I think building this whole green ecosystem, I think we can both look to other sectors, but we can also look to other countries. One of the sectors that I think that we can take inspiration from when you also talk about building sort of the whole green ecosystem is the fintech ecosystem that has been built here in Copenhagen and really helped together with like the fantastic ventures that have been built, sort of the trade shifts and the pecons and etc. Then Copenhagen FinTech has also been part of sort of putting a landmark for Denmark in fintechs. They have a strong community of startups, of mentors, of investors, etc. So that's one thing. The other thing is the health and pharmaceuticals, because some of these we can't only like save the planet by making more platform technology. We also need to make like actual physical solutions that can like capture carbon, that can do the power to X, and for that you need to look more, I think, to the healthcare. Like that kind of more patient capital in pharmaceuticals, because this is more than or a bit of a different approach to financing than traditional venture.
Definitely. And then I guess we can add that also just commercializing science, which is the US, is one of the best countries in the world. So looking more at how does those universities actually accelerate the science and taking it all the way into the market.
Yeah, I think you're. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to convey. I think you're absolutely right that we have so much to learn still in Denmark from commercializing science. We shouldn't leave like the super core tech people, like they have so much good stuff. If we don't support them with like business competences and put all of these together, like some of the accelerators are already doing now in Denmark, then I think we're going to miss out.
Exactly. And then I actually really like Norway, because unlike Denmark, Norway is even stronger when it comes to public funding at an even earlier stage. And right now, if you look at Greentech and green technologies, most is being funded by private actors back home. So I think if anyone's interested, looking at how does Norway structure it is also worth a look. Cool. We've spoken about new innovation-driving processes and initiatives, but could you also talk about, as an impact investor, obviously you need to de-risk and you can't look at every single impact idea. How do you kind of narrow down what are the impact technologies that you strongly believe in? And maybe that's also a recommendation to us as a country or a region-wide. Maybe we should focus down from many strength positions to just a few, and saying, but why don't we just focus upon two, and then globally becomes the very best at these single two industries, rather than dipping our toes in a little bit of everything. But what do you believe in?
Yeah. I agree very much. I would love that we say, okay, let's just be world class here. But I think it's very true that we need to build on our positions of strengths. And I think you can look at it. You can look at it in many different ways. But one is from a technology perspective, and the other is from a sector perspective. I think from a technology perspective, we are world class in building digital infrastructure, building platform technologies. Building robotic solutions. We've also shown lately that we're super strong in that. And then if you combine that with the sectors where we're world class, and here I believe very much in energy and in food and agriculture. Yeah. And why do I do that? So two things. First of all, this is where we make the biggest impact. Not to say that we can't make impact in other sectors, but if you look at the numbers, then if we transform the way that we produce and distribute our energy, and we transform the way that we grow, produce, and distribute our food, then this is clearly where we have the biggest impact. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we're really strong in energy and also in food and ag. In energy, we produce twice as much renewable energy as number 2 in line after us among the industrialized countries, and then still, I can say only 35% of the energy that is consumed in Denmark is from renewable energy. So we are so far, and then still
only 35% of consumed.
Only 35% of the energy consumed is from renewable energy. And I say only because this is compared to other countries, like very large, but it also tells me there's a huge potential. Yeah. So there's a huge potential in the existing in the existing energies, wind and solar power. But we also need to increase the use of renewable energies. Then we also need to have investments into like the power to X, the next generation of energy. So that's within energy. And I think another point to that is that when we're so strong already, there's so much talent in the country. I'm sure that there are so many people in Ørsted that are just like contemplating what their next venture should be. Just as with the founders of Pleo, they came out of Tradeshift. They seen like how are we building large scale, and then how can I build myself.
We started to gather up a few extra people amongst the audience. So I think I'm gonna ask this question. It's going to include obviously you, but it's also going to include all of you. So if you have any inputs or ideas for conditions, now is the time. So if we as a country are to build the best conditions for Denmark to produce a green tech unicorn in the next, I would love to say 5, but I guess realistically 10 years from now, where should we address our attention? What do we need to do today? We can start. But I will be pointing fingers very shortly amongst you guys. Just a short take on that from your side, and then I'll be pointing fingers.
So I'll point you 3 things. First, I think you need to think beyond unicorns. I don't think we can only talk about unicorns in this space. Secondly, I think we need to attract more venture capital, and we need to attract capital that is more patient to build, not only to distribute the existing technologies, but also to build the new technologies. And then we need to be damn good at like getting talent and competences and experience from other sectors and merge it with the already super strong talent and competences that there already is in the Greentech, and combine them.
Okay, now it's your turn.
And I can deepen it, but let's have some input.
Oh, who should we choose? There's so many volunteers. Yes, you.
I think there's a need to prepare the markets as well to be ready to choose sustainability.
A little bit louder.
There's a need to prepare the markets as well to choose sustainability ahead of cost efficiency or convenience.
So you would like to educate the markets in order for them to be ready to actually welcome and buy and shop for. Oh, amazing. We have microphones.
So what we've noticed whenever we looked at markets is that there's a strong correlation between the regulations rolled out and the willingness of the public to choose sustainable solutions. Mm-hmm. So the governments can help a lot by rolling out regulations that then become the default thinking for the whole society.
But this is very interesting because it's kind of back to the opening ceremony of who has the responsibility, right, of driving the green revolution. Is it the public who should go and subsidize, or is it actually the green tech entrepreneurs who should go in and figure out a new and amazing production way where it becomes cheap enough so that the green alternative is on price with the regular or traditional products?
Mm. I couldn't agree more. And if I can just can I make a funny comment to the Norwegian
You can make a funny comment.
Not on you, but on Norway, because I've also always been, because I agree very much that although I find that the market really has to drive this, there's no doubt that we also need sort of the public incentives to be in place. So there's a reason why Oslo has the most electrical vehicles in the world driving around right now. It's because it's basically cheaper. There's also a reason why they have like far fewer teenage smokers, which I think is a really interesting. Like having a teenager coming up myself is really interesting. It's basically because they just like doubled the price. Like we take it like baby steps. Like sometimes you need to do something that is more radical. You need to make it like a lot cheaper. The whole tolls and tax breaks and everything that they've done in Oslo on the electrical vehicles, and you can also you can replicate it to another. So, good point.
It is, definitely. Of course, I have to give the word to Human from Sustainary.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so exciting. I can't help joining the discussion. There are a couple of things that pops up in my mind that I would actually have your opinion about. One of them is that we have a huge public sector in Denmark, which alone by the way that they purchase and give products and so on, I see a little, maybe even not existing opportunities for startups in getting into that market, which I think is a shame. And the other thing is, of course, making learning from Norway and trying with some incentives to make it easier for basically fund the pension funds and so on to invest earlier. We have a way to go because there are too many of the bright technologies. It takes time.
Yep.
And they don't see the daylight. Only 5% of all research is being commercialized, and I think in that sense we should look into just adding 1% on top of that. That would make a huge difference.
That was like 3 in 1, right? So the kinder. But the pensions fund is such a relevant question, in particular to Barbara, because she sits on a committee with just the right people. But please.
So super good points to your point about the public sector and the procurement. I read yesterday that the healthcare sector in Denmark stands for 6% of the carbon emission in Denmark. You don't really think that, and the whole thing that like when I was tested this morning again, like the whole like throwing away culture, which we're really happy for in terms of during a pandemic and also in general, like how do you tackle that? So the whole public procurement is super strong, would be a super strong driver if you took some decisions. I think there's something on the way, but again, would be nice if it was more radical. To your other question, I think it is essential that we attract more international capital, also to take more early stage investments. We talked about that we have Antler coming to Denmark. They're currently in 12 countries, and now they're coming to Denmark to as a company builder, basically. So they have they would like all of you and you on the screen to apply, and then they can support through an acceleration program for very early stage. I know they'll also come later today.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, one very quick question from you, and
Absolutely.
then I'm going to point out, and you don't know this, Greenwise Invest. So you, as a green impact investor, because you're on my panel later today, right? Yeah. Yes. Can you start thinking, what can we do as a country in order for you to invest in even more green startups? But now, and you have a bit of time to consider this, because Nick has a question.
Certainly. Barbara, you touched on this earlier about talent located within industries and the potential for cross-fertilization. And looking at impact, what other industries or what other specialties do you think that the impact industry could really gain from attracting? What other skill sets do you see other industries contributing that could help impact go and grow?
So I think the whole UX, customer design, AI technology. When you have a camera in a vertical farm, then you need artificial intelligence to sort of adapt and transform the pictures into data that you can that are actionable. Mm-hmm. So everything from deep tech AI to UX, etc. And now I lost you. You're there. Yes. Yeah, so obviously from the financial sector, fundraising. I think that is obvious. So yeah, good point.
But I guess also an understanding of having someone on the team or on your advisory board who speaks the language of finance, so that you can use someone else to bridge. You are the entrepreneur, you are passionate about your idea and your product, you are the expert on that side. But funding in itself is also an entire expert area. And you just get further, one, if you speak the language, and two, you understand, like in any negotiations, what is important mutually on both sides of the table. So you need, if you don't have that knowledge or experience yourself, then do find someone who can help you. What can we do for you and other green investors to invest even more? And welcome.
Yeah, I think, I'm here as part of Danban.
Yeah.
From our perspective, I think we should bring in more talent.
Yeah.
Educate people to go into business. We have a lot of people doing that, but we have a lot of people not even consider being part of this adventure. And we need to motivate them. So I'm talking education.
Education. Does anyone, this is a broad question to everyone in the audience, do we have seen some good examples of how to educate people, how to motivate people to actually start their own business? Very specific examples. You know, my cousin something, or I've seen, and you have something to add.
Yeah. So when I mean bring in talent, I don't mean just, the idea makers or people like them. I mean like the backstage that make things work. We much too often see one very talented person, and then he or she needs a crew. And to think about this crew and to actually get access to a good crew is essential for this to grow. And we don't have that infrastructure.
Check. Any specific ideas? I got plenty, so. We've seen experience on having people who are not entrepreneurs and who does not have that great idea. I don't have that great idea, for example. But then have people like myself and like you who are not the entrepreneur work in startups, because you will get inspired and you will have the mindset and you will be one of those unsung heroes, which you are talking about, who are actually, one thing is the one who had the idea, but if you don't do anything about it and execute it, it doesn't really matter. I guess another thing is also on a more general level that when it comes to international talents, right now we favor and incentivize as a country for PhDs and soccer players, to put it simply. But actually some of those unsung heroes does not necessarily have a PhD. Maybe they have a bachelor, or maybe they're autodidact and kind of made their own way through it. But those are actually even more important talent than the PhDs when it comes to the tech startup ecosystem. So it's also a matter of redefining what is talent on a category level. I just looked at time, and like always, we are a bit short of time, so I'll just get one last question to Barbara, and you need to be able to answer this shortly. So it's like 2-3 years ago that you turned into becoming an impact investor yourself.
Yep.
Do you have, for new investors who would like to turn impact investors, a piece of good advice?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is expand your horizon. And the second thing is stay close to the talent that you, in the sector you came from. So if you come from another sector, stay close to that so you can pull in the talent. So I was as fortunate as I could actually start my journey in this space by traveling. That's not something you've been so fortunate to do.
Did I say short?
Oh, sorry.
So you want people to expand their horizon, and you want them to be able to say what is it that you bring to the table.
Yeah.
And you can add 2 more sentences.
I was fortunate enough to be able to travel and start travel and expand my horizon back then when I started. I went to New York, the General Assembly in New York. I went to Davos. I went to South by Southwest. And this is not something that you've been able to do for a couple of years. Yeah. But now it's opening up again. And there's actually a COP26 coming up in Glasgow in November. So that's the next opportunity.
Mm-hmm. It happens to be November 1st till the 12th, I know. And I also know that one of your portfolio companies, Human Hotel, is the official host. And it means that you get to stay in a private home of a politician, an activist, a green entrepreneur, someone who's dedicated towards the COP26 summit. And since you're here today, I assume that you agree it's important to diversify your horizon, to meet and talk with people who are different than yourself. And if you're interested in getting the international perspectives, I guess November COP26 is a good place to start. Thank you for your time and for letting us kick off the Green Gold Investment Summit. Cheers.
Thank you.